Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Pemko number 136D. This is a dark bronze anodized aluminum water return interlocking threshold is what it is. This is an interlocking threshold. That's just what we call it. This is a very common interlocking threshold in the sense that its dimensional properties are very compliant with lots of different residential type applications for both the height of the threshold and the width as well. The 136 is representative of this profile, and let's go over the profile dimensions now. There is an image below this video that shows the overall width to be 4 7/8 and the overall height to be 1 inch. Okay. The D in the part number stands for dark bronze, and I'm going to look at my other screen here to see the other finishes that it is available in. For sure it will be available in the A for mill aluminum finish. It will be available in the D, sorry, forgive me. There it is, D for dark, so A for mill aluminum. We've got BDG, which is bright dip gold. That would be a very metallic, shiny brass sort of color. You'll have D for dark bronze, which is this. G for gold, that's going to be a matte color gold. Then you're going to have SN for satin nickel as well. Now that satin nickel finish is certainly not incredibly faithful to a true satin nickel, and the reason it's not is because it's an anodized finish. It's complementary, but it is not true satin nickel, so keep that in mind if you're looking at the SN version. Now this 136 is available in two base materials, aluminum, which is this, and all of the aforementioned anodized finishes that I mentioned earlier. Okay. And also a B for bronze or brass. You probably might call it brass. It's actually architectural bronze, an amalgamation of, I think, about 4 base materials that make it brass or architectural bronze. The architectural metal that hardware is manufactured from, and thresholds as well. Onto that base material, you can do a mill finish. Just leave it like it looks when it's extruded at the mill. You can do a satin finish, which would be like a 606, a satin brass finish. You can do a 605, which would be a polished brass finish with a lacquer on it. You can do a 613 finish, which would be oil rub bronze. Pemko can even emulate a 612 finish, a satin bronze on it as well. It's a process that they have, that they use a certain material to give it that look. So those, for sure, 5 finish versions on that architectural bronze are available. And because it's architectural bronze, you can technically do other finishes as well. It's like a piece of brass hardware, whether it be a lock or a doorstop or a piece of exit device hardware. They could even powder coat the material should you want it to be powder coated. Technically that can be done because of the base material. Now, why would you want a piece of solid bronze? Well, there are certain clients that's appropriate for their application. Let's just be frank about it. If someone's built a $2 million home, they're probably going to opt for a threshold that is in line with the value of the home rather than put a piece of aluminum. Why might everyone want architectural bronze? Well, because it lasts significantly longer. There are instances of solid architectural bronze threshold installations that are decades old, and you won't get that lifespan out of aluminum, is the bottom line. Now, what is this interlocking threshold? Let's talk about it. First of all, it's a threshold that interlocks. The hook strip is going to be included. And by the way, this is just a 6-inch sample piece. I mean, it's literally a sample piece. This is just a sample as well. This is a J hook or a hook strip. You can see why we call it J. It's made of steel, and it's got a white coat galvanized finish on it. Okay. Now, imagine this nailed to the bottom of the door. Imagine this secured to the floor, and the connection is just like that. Allows for an incredibly positive and secure seal at the bottom of the door. It's exactly how this is installed. The J-hook gets nailed to the bottom of the door. There is a variation of the J-hook. It's called the L-hook, and guess what? Anyway, you know what I was about to say. It will be mounted to the face of the door, and then that L, and I'm going to draw a small little detail of what that looks like. Here we go. So you could have your interlocking threshold. That's what your situation's going to look like right there. Now, you can do that J-hook just like that. That's obviously what it's going to look like. Or you can do that L hook mounted right here to the face of the door and then underneath. So it's an L hook. Why would you want the L hook? Well, maybe if there was no possibility of you actually removing the door from the hinges and laying it flat to get a J hook installed underneath it, that might be a very logical reason why. For every 100 of these that you sell, or maybe for every 1,000 or more of the J hook style, you'll sell an L hook. So they're not really that common. They're exposed, and I think you'd probably opt for something that's not exposed rather than having it exposed. You could also do something interesting on this interlocking threshold system where your normal installation is going to look like that. You could also do a scenario by which you would notch the underside of the door to account for the drip cap, account for the J hook or the hook strip, and make it look like that. Now that's a less common scenario where you're going to notch the bottom of the door as shown here, but it's not uncommon and certainly not unheard of. Because this threshold is a bit taller, imagine that your undercut's going to be every bit of 1 1/8. It might be a little bit unsightly, and if you were to hang your door down over to this berm that's here, probably make for a much nicer looking installation. And I'll tell you, those applications where they're installing solid bronze thresholds, they are certainly giving it that sort of detail at the bottom as well. Now, these are elegant scenarios to install on your door opening because they're extremely effective at sealing the bottom of the door. Obviously, metal on metal doesn't necessarily give you a good way to retard the transmission of energy because it's material that is conductive, basically. But when it comes to stopping air, when it comes to stopping moisture, this is going to capture it, no question about it. Now, should any moisture actually creep in, the other elegant sort of scenario to an interlock, or a water return like this one is called, is this detail that you're basically just staring at. It's this trough that's down here. Okay. Now, when there's a water return scenario, there is literally going to be 2 or 3 holes, depending on the length, drilled right down in here, right down into the little crotch of the water return area, so that any moisture would get in and then underneath the threshold, that in the face of the threshold, they'll actually file a small notch so that the water can just see itself out. And that's part and parcel of this sort of design and is typical. A water return system is typical on the taller interlocks that will allow this sort of a berm type construction. If you had an interlock which was like 1/2 inch overall height, it's going to be so short that you won't have that principle. But in a taller one like this, 7/8, 1 inch, even 1.25 inch tall, you'll certainly have a water return provision. And when you're adding to cart, speaking of this water return provision, you have the option to elect a water pan, and that's basically just a piece of sheet metal. If it's aluminum like this, order aluminum. If it's brass or bronze threshold, order a brass water pan. You don't want disparate materials touching each other. Technically, it's really not going to be a problem, but technically, it is a problem. You could see premature corrosion, I suppose, especially in the existence or the presence of water, so keep that in mind. Now, the water pan is very inexpensive when it's aluminum. It's so inexpensive that, in my opinion, if you elect not to use it, it's not a big investment that you'll discard. I would always suggest that a water pan gets installed with these. They'll just sit underneath here is really where it will go. Okay. Now, I'm a big fan of interlocking thresholds, and it's because they're effective, and it's because they last for decades themselves. The only time that you really have trouble with an interlock is when the J hook has become damaged. How does that happen? Well, you take the door off the hinges after it's been in existence for 10 years and you place it down, not realizing, oh gosh, there's a J hook underneath there, and then you crush the J hook. Well, the good news is you can buy just this piece. That's called the Z61 from Pemko, and it will include nails as well. So unintentional damage is really where it comes from. Or over time, they do fatigue. You know, the where you pierce through the J hook with the nail, that installation will over time kind of work its way so that the J hook is no longer exactly positioned as you're pulling, pushing the door closed over thousands and thousands of cycles over years, the J-hook will creep a little bit, will tear the material a little bit, so you might need to replace it for that scenario alone. But that's generally the only sort of shortcoming that you're going to see in an interlocking threshold sort of installation. Available in all kinds of different lengths. This happens, again, to be a sample. We've got it listed in the site from everywhere from 2-foot to 8-foot lengths, and you can have longer, but it would be pretty atypical to have anything longer than 8 foot. Plus, we don't list them because of the cost to ship something longer than 8 foot is generally prohibitive. But if you need longer than 8 foot, let us know. We'll be happy to quote it for you. If you have need for a custom length, by all means, order the next longest piece or pieces and simply indicate in the comment field the net length you want us to ship it out at. Why? Well, we'll cut the aluminum to the proper length. We'll give you that countersunk hole, and if this was the genuine article, there would be a drilled and countersunk hole over here for the screws to go through, which would be included. Probably a number 10 by inch and 7/8 or 2 inch or something in that range. Flathead screw and a complementary finish. Complementary finish on the screws, and plus also the hook strip is going to be included. Now, generally, you're probably going to have to cut this a little bit, but it's just a small piece of steel that you certainly will be able to cut carefully with a hacksaw. If it was me, I would probably get something stuck in there so that as I'm cutting it, I'm not tearing any of the material, getting a real nice cut. When these are cut at the factory, they're cut on a saw that's meant to cut metal so that they're cut cleanly, as you can see on that factory edge that's there. So regarding the length, if you need that custom length, order the next longest piece, and we'll be happy to supply it for you that way. I'm partial to these interlocking thresholds, and it's because they're effective and they're elegant. They're super old technology that works very, very well to really close off the bottom of the door. Now, speaking of Pemko, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Pemko products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. My suggestion, if you're looking for an interlock threshold and you're doing a new installation, or even trying to replace an old one, pull up the catalog and then do a find function. Just search for 136. And as you noticed earlier, I had to tab through several results, but eventually you'll get to it. You'll see that page and then all of the sister products before and after it, so that you can make the best educated decision in terms of the dimensional properties of the one that you want, and maybe even the base material as well, and know that you can rely on us for any sort of technical support before and after your purchase. If you have any questions on the Pemko 136D, dark bronze interlocking threshold, or any other Pemko product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.